today's subject is about past life karma. So
Yeah.
I'd love if in the beginning, if maybe you give us an introduction about that and how do we, how to say, how do we like have this karma, and how do we accumulate it from past lives?
Yeah, thank you. This is one of my favorite subjects to delve into, is the idea of karma, where it comes from, how do we accumulate karma, how do we ultimately undo the karma, how much does karma really actually have an effect on us? And I've been looking into this stuff for many years. I really became fascinated with the idea of past lives and past life karma at a certain point in my life when I was in definitely a dark night of the soul, one of the kind of the low points on the roller coaster of my life. And I know we can all relate to being in those dark nights of the soul. But there was one particular book that came to me at that time by Robert Schwartz called Your Soul's Plan. And now I think he has one or two more. But the entire book was about how the life plan is created, and about how our soul will put things in our journey that are meant to be there, and how soul contracts are created and why. And so that really kind of launched the curiosity for me, and I really became obsessed with it since then. And that was the impetus for me to develop my soul plan readings, which I'll talk a little bit more about later, where I actually look into someone's life plan, and I look into their soul contracts. I see what went on in past lives between themselves and someone else, or what went on in past lives independent of other people that is having some sort of karmic effect on their life. And lately I've also been really fascinated with relating astrology to past life karma. And one of my favorite things to do is to look at someone's nodes, their lunar nodes, their north node and their south node. And we'll talk a little bit about that briefly today as well. So we're going to delve into the topic of karma and past lives from many different angles. You're going to learn a lot on this show. I promise you that. It might not be a bad idea to take some notes. And we'll talk a little bit about also, you know, what is free will, what is destiny, what is meant to be, what isn't. You know, are the timing of events set in stone or not? These are all fascinating questions that I've spent the past decade or more trying to figure out, and I will spend the rest of my life trying to figure out. So I hope we can have some fun on today's call and learn some stuff. So let's talk a little bit to start out about what soul contracts really are, first of all. So I'm sure most people on this call have probably already heard of the idea of soul contracts, and you might have an idea in your mind of what a soul contract is, but I'll just give you kind of my understanding of what a soul contract is. So a soul contract is created out of a desire for souls to be able to utilize one another. We're not on an island here. We come into this physical reality with all sorts of different other souls around us, both human and animal and other. And so we have the opportunity to utilize the fact that we're living in a society, the fact that we're living in a world with many beings, in order to create the circumstances for certain contrasting experiences. The idea of contrast is very important to understand when you're trying to understand why souls, or why your soul would create certain circumstances or events in your life. Think about the contrast, the idea of contrast as it applies to colors. We have the realm of colors going from warm to cold, going from red all the way up to violet. And think about how different life would be if you didn't have the experience of different colors. How different life would be if life was in black and white. And I know for some people to different degrees it is, people with color blindness. And there are people who are blind. But even for someone who's blind, they can experience contrast in many other ways. We all experience contrast in multiple ways. So we can experience, if you're blind, you could experience contrast through sound, through the 7 musical notes, right, on the scale, an octave, which all carry a different frequency. And the difference between the sounds of a bird and the sound of a mountain lion, the sound of a flowing brook, or the sound of thunder and lightning. And all of us experience that contrast there. But think about in your life, just kind of taking a bird's eye view for a moment. Look back at your history up until now, and just take note of all the contrasting experiences that you've had. And it's really quite remarkable if you think about it. And think about it in terms of contrasting emotional experiences. That's a good way to kind of begin this exploration, is think of, okay, all the times when I was extremely happy. Think about those times in your life where you felt, even if you're depressed right now and listening to this call, and I'm sure some of you are, and that's okay. But think about times in your life where, you know what? Wow, I was for that moment blissfully happy. Or for that moment, I was completely satisfied. Think about those moments of completeness. Then think about the contrast. Think about those moments of severe depression. Think about those moments of extreme fear. And you can see how the frequency is so contrasting between those types of emotional experiences. Think of times in your life when you've been in love with, it could be a person, it could be an animal, it could be anything. Think of times in your life when you've been heartbroken, you've been devastated, you've grieved, someone died, or you lost a relationship. You know, think about those moments where you were yelling yes because you accomplished something, and then those moments where you were crying, maybe on a bathroom floor, shaking, crying because it felt like your life was over. That's all by design. The reason I bring this up is because it's important to understand that the nature of karma really is rooted in the desire for contrast. The desire as a soul, when we come into this third density realm, which is the human kingdom, is whether we're coming as a starseed soul, which means our soul is coming from somewhere else, and then rooting ourselves really kind of from a scientific place, way of seeing it, in the astral realm, or the fourth dimensional realm of Earth, and then coming in as we choose and experiencing all sorts of different incarnations. And we've, you know, one of the greatest experiences of my life was a spiritual experience I had over a decade ago. And it was actually thanks to a psychedelic substance, which earlier on in my journey I did a lot of work with plant medicine and psychedelics, and it was incredibly helpful for my journey. And it's not for everyone, but for me it was. And I remember I was camping alone out in the woods, and I just happened, it was serendipitous, I just happened to be the only person in this entire campground that night. And so it felt like a good time to do by myself a plant medicine ceremony. And at a certain point, I went into the restroom at this campground, and I looked into the mirror, and I saw my form change many times to all sorts of different other beings. I saw myself as, I'm a white male. I saw myself as a black woman. I saw myself as a Native American or an indigenous man, an indigenous woman. I saw myself as a tall blonde woman. I saw myself as extraterrestrial forms. I saw myself as all these different forms, and that was a great experience because it really, I was already sure because of other experiences I had before that past lives were a real thing, but that really solidified it for me, actually seeing those faces in the mirror. And funny enough, in my past life regression sessions, the method, there's so many ways to do past life regressions, and you know, they all the different methods can work. And I have a whole toolbox of available to me of like different ways that I can get people to step into their past lives. But one of my favorite methods is using mirrors. And funny enough, I just made that connection now. I had that experience in the mirror, and I love using that technique of the mirrors in my past life regression. Essentially, this idea of contrast is so important. As souls, we want to experience being tall, being short, being black, brown, white, having skin issues, having non-skin issues, you know, as in like, you know, you could be albino, or you could have rosacea, or, you know, all of your body in one life, or have burn marks all over your body. And then in another life, you have, you know, model looks, being wealthy, being impoverished, starving, being famous, being a nobody, being a mother, being a father, being a brother, being a sister, being a child, being an only child. Like I'm lucky enough to be an only child in this life, but in other lives I've had a lot of brothers and sisters. I have had clients recently, you know, one of them said she grew up as one of 13 kids, you know. And funny enough, growing up as some clients, not her, but some clients that either grew up in a household with a lot of siblings, like 10 or 12, or, and usually it's both, in a previous lifetime they were a mother to like 8, 10, 12, 14, 16 kids. A lot of times if they're incarnated as a woman in this lifetime, they have absolutely no desire to have children, and it's actually not in their life plan. And then, you know, on the other side of the coin, there's women who in previous lifetimes they were barren. Maybe they were sterile. Maybe they couldn't have children. Or maybe they had a child taken away, or maybe they had a miscarriage, or something difficult happened, and the soul wants to experience the contrast of that by having a lot of kids and having healthy kids, you know? So that's just one example of how this idea of contrast works. As souls, we want to experience all aspects of life. Imagine like, you know, Shakespearean plays, all the different themes that can be experienced in Shakespearean plays, from triumph to betrayal to death to birth to, you know, romance and love to heartbreak and grief, you know, wealth and poorness, health and sickness. As souls in this earth realm, we experience all of it. And another cool way to look at the idea of contrast is looking at the zodiac wheel. So I'm very much a big fan of Western astrology, and I love, in my soul plan readings, I almost always take a look at someone's natal chart to give us certain clues about where they come from in past lives, where they're going, their personality, etc. So I absolutely love astrology. And one wonderful way of looking at contrast is to look at the zodiac wheel as this whole pie. And each slice of the zodiac wheel is one of the 12 signs. And they're, of course, evenly sliced 30 degrees out of the 360-degree pie. And the soul, as a soul, you want to experience every piece of that pie. So that's what's cool when you look at your north node and your south node. Your south node in astrology is where you came from. It's where your most recent, generally it's your 3 most recent past lives. It was the general theme of kind of what you were used to. And in your north node then is where you're going. It's where your soul, it's the contrast. The opposite, so for me, my south node's in Libra. So the most recent past lives that I came from was being very much a part of the family, really kind of making sure I'm integrated well with a group, not speaking up for myself very well, not learning to be independent, relying on family my whole life, because that's one of the aspects of the sign of Libra is family. It's about balance and integration with a small group, and then Aquarius is more about integration with a much larger group. But what's the opposite of Libra? It's Aries. And Aries is the most aggressively individualistic sign that there is. It's the first sign of the zodiac. It's the ultimate cardinal sign, because not only is it starting, cardinal signs are at the beginning of the season. Not only is it the beginning of spring, it is the beginning of the astrological year. And so it's the ultimate starter. It's the spark of light. It's the ultimate masculine energy sign. And for those of us like myself who are North Node Libras in Western astrology, we're meant to become independent. We're meant to learn independence in this lifetime, fierce independence. So for me, my soul set it up, being an only child, I really have to learn how to become my own person, as opposed to if I was, born into a family with 8 other siblings, that lesson would have been more difficult. The lesson could have been navigated in a similar way, because it could have been like, oh, well, now you got to figure out how to stand out from the crowd amongst your other siblings. But the way my soul decided to go about it was being an only child, right? My soul, certain soul contracts between myself and my parents, for example, really helped me to learn how to not rely on other people, how to not rely on family for everything, how to become fiercely independent. And I've done pretty well at that in a lot of ways. I mean, I'm an entrepreneur and I'm successful at it. And so that's just one example of this idea of contrast. So I wanted to start out this talk by talking about contrast, because once you understand that that's the goal for souls coming into this earth realm is to experience contrast, well, the goal really is ascension. Let me clarify. The goal is to ascend out of this third density and into the fourth density, or the fifth dimension. But while you're in the third density, or third dimension, there is a requirement in this realm to reincarnate. I very much believe that there's a requirement that you must continue to reincarnate, and you can't end the cycle of reincarnation until you've balanced out all your karma. So what happens, especially, for example, as starseed souls, we imagine you're this super advanced sixth density consciousness. You're basically at that point you're merged with the entire planetary consciousness. You feel like you're one planet, yet you also remember this individual history as being a person. You can, for fun, be a holographic person or being, or you can take on any form that you desire. And you're like, this is so fun, but I want to do something new for fun. I want to go to a physical realm again and re-experience what that's like. Because if you've reached the point as a soul where you're able to become a starseed, that means you're able to fractalize. That means you're able to fragment. And it's like giving birth to a new piece of self that you're then able to send or direct anywhere you like. But as this, very advanced soul, you say, you know what, let's be physical again. Let's see what that's like, and let's go somewhere new that we didn't come from. So you're looking through the holographic, brochures, so to speak, of all the different types of, or all the different planets out there that are accepting starseed souls. And I believe there's councils and laws and, within a galaxy that are determined, like, okay, how many starseeds are we wanting for this planet, et cetera. But so let's say one of the possibilities is Earth, and you say, wow, look at this. This planet is in the freaking dark ages. They're having wars all the time, and there's disease. If you're lucky, you live to 70. There's half the population is impoverished. They're under the spell of control. They're spiritually turned off, and just so it's a planet that's very much in the dark ages. And you say, well, wouldn't that be an exciting challenge? Wouldn't that be an exciting challenge to go to Earth and to become a physical being again. And then you see that, well, one of the requirements is forced reincarnation. You must reincarnate. It's part of the rules of the game, I believe. You must reincarnate over and over again until you clear your karma that you end up accumulating and you ascend out of here. So you come in all excited as a soul to come into Earth, and then you start planning out your lifetimes. You say, okay, my first lifetime, I just want to get a taste. I just want to get a taste of what this planet is like from a real carnal sense. I'm going to go and create a lifetime during the Paleolithic age. And then you say, okay, well, that was fun. Then I'm going to go create a lifetime, during I don't know, 6,000 BC or whatever, during ancient times. And I'm going to be around when people are first starting to, I probably have the time period wrong. I didn't look this up, but, I'm going to be around the time when the wheel is starting to be invented and people are, starting to learn how to farm more efficiently or whatever. And then you choose all these different time periods. And then the other thing, to give more possibilities of contrast, is you don't even have to stay in the same timeline. Like you and I, just for a moment, to step aside and talk about timelines, you and I and everyone listening to this call and everyone we see on television, we're all in one particular timeline. But there are many, many, many timelines that exist where things are happening slightly differently. So you, as a soul, you can choose different time periods, different timelines. You get to choose who your parents are. You get to choose the time that you're going to be born, which will determine your natal chart. So astrology is very significant. It will determine your personality in that life is really determined by where the planets are when you came out of the womb and into the world. And so the soul will look at that, and it's not exact. It's not exact. One of the coolest things, one of the coolest realizations that I've come to over the past couple of years, and I really have to thank Robert Schwartz's second book, Your Soul's Gift, to kind of just turn that light on in my mind, and to allow me to explore this idea that just like we make mistakes all the time, you and I and everyone on this call has made a ton of mistakes. We will continue to make mistakes. We're both perfect beings because we are the God essence, and we are a very advanced soul, manifest in a temporary physical form. Yet, at the same time, we're imperfect. The ego, the consciousness, the ego, both the conscious and the ego self are, in a sense, imperfect, but also perfect. Meaning, yes, we can make mistakes, and so can our soul. And it's such a fascinating idea, is that the soul actually does the best it can to plan out lifetimes and to create soul contracts with other souls to best explore the themes that it would like to explore in that particular lifetime. But it's not an exact science. And sometimes the soul will plan, an unfortunate and kind of dark example of this is suicide. I can't say for sure. And I'm someone who unfortunately did lose a very close friend to suicide. So it's a very intimate topic for myself. And I've, over the years, helped many clients who had lost people to suicide around them through that, the emotional repercussions of that, and helping them to understand it. At this point, I don't believe that a soul ever plans a suicide. And I could be wrong. What I believe is that when in cases of suicide, in most cases, the soul has created an extremely difficult life plan where the soul knows there is a risk of suicide. The soul knows there is a risk of it being too difficult to be able to actually finish. But the soul says, we're going to try anyways. We're going to go for it. And the hope is that the person, once that consciousness has the body and is the ego personality, that the person will they'll seize the opportunity of whatever synchronicities, whatever assistance from angelic beings, or whatever books and other people, inspirational things they come across, that they will seize those opportunities and move through the pain without ending the incarnation. But it doesn't always work like that, does it? I mean, suicide is a huge, huge issue in our world. And my perspective on that could change. That's just what I've discovered up until now. I don't think suicide is ever something that's planned. I think it's something that the soul knows is a possibility, but the soul is testing the ego personality, so to speak, to see if they can move through it without ending the incarnation. And if they do, it really helps to take this massive karmic burden off. And we'll talk about that. We'll kind of transition to talking about accumulating karma. But that's an example. And other examples of like imperfect planning could be, relationships. Romantic relationships are really a good example of imperfect planning. I've been doing these soul plan readings now for a couple of years specifically. I've been doing readings for over a decade, but I've been doing specifically these soul plan readings, which I created a couple of years ago. And so I've had a lot of experience looking at people's life plans and looking at the options that end up being presented. And really, the life plan, especially when it comes to relationships, is generally never as simple as this is exactly what's supposed to happen at this time. More like it's this algorithm. If the free will character, if the ego personality goes this direction, these will be the options that are presented to them. If they go this direction, these are the options that will be presented to them. And did you ever, did anyone on this call, I wonder, ever read one of those choose your own adventure books? Like, I'm young still, but I'm old enough at least to remember, like, growing up reading those choose your own adventure books, and I absolutely loved them. Basically you would, you'd read a section that says, if you decide to, open the door, go to page 64. If you decide to, keep the door locked and go down the hallway to the left, turn to page 33. And that's kind of how I see the life plan unfolding, is that it's an algorithm that isn't perfect either. There's imperfections in the planning, but generally, like when it comes to romantic relationships, for example, the soul contract is usually something like this. It's usually something like, well, there's an option for us to stay together for this amount of period of time, and if we do, that means I'm choosing this particular path in my choose your own adventure, and you're choosing this particular path. And so some options that would have been possible if we ended the relationship will not be possible now, and you'll go on an alternative path of possibilities, and there could be other characters. So, for example, a soul contract of a relationship that it's written in the soul contract that it's not going to work out. It's not a divine union. And that's that's the term I like to use for the highest possibility of a partnership. A divine union is what I would refer to as two ascending beings, whether they're earth seeds or star seeds. And by the way, earth seeds would be, I didn't mention that, just to clarify, earth seeds would be souls that came from the animal kingdom, the planet animal kingdom of Earth, not from somewhere else, not from somewhere else in the galaxy or outside the galaxy. So they've had a little bit of a different, very different trajectory of how they got to being human, essentially. But both are ascending, whether you're an earth seed or you're star seed, and there's probably both on this call, probably more star seeds than earth seeds. But lately, over the past 2 years especially, I've seen more and more earth seeds coming to find me, even though I do so much star seed work, because there's more and more earth seeds awakening now. There's more and more organic consciousnesses or earth seeds waking up spiritually, so they're finding this sort of material. So there's probably both listening to this call, which is really cool. But either way, you're still, the intention is to ascend through the sub-octaves of the third density or the third dimension up to the fourth density or fifth dimension, same thing. But in order to do so, you're going to have to, as we're going to talk about, balance out all your karma. But anyways, back to what I was talking about, the soul contract. So, for example, it's not a divine union partnership, and the soul contract says at most we'll be together for 24 years. At least we'll be together for 3 years. And that's very possible. It sounds crazy. Like, how could you have that expansive of a time period? But it can happen. Or at most we'll be together for 40 years. Or at least we'll be together for, 30 years or 25 years. There'll be general kind of time periods, length of periods. There will be a general, this is what I believe at least, there will be a general kind of outline of what karmic themes are being negotiated in the relationship. So, okay, in our most recent past life, I was your mother, you were my son. And then before that, you were my mother, I was your son. And then before that, we were sisters. Then before that, you were my uncle. And then before that, we were business partners, and something happened between us and you stole money from me. And then before that, we were in a battle together, and I defended you from someone that was trying to kill you, and I killed him. And then before that, we had hurt each other, just an example. And so because of all that karma, as you go back through time, as you can see all that karma, that creates a necessity for certain themes to be revisited during a particular soul contract. So some soul contracts, the idea is that we're going to experience a karmic balancing. For example, in a past life, if you and I are in a relationship, past life, as whatever character I was playing, I betrayed you. I lied to you. I betrayed you. In this lifetime, we might say, all right, let's rebalance this karma, because now there's an imbalance. There's an imbalance in our karmic history together. Imagine, like, as two souls having a particular energy field between them, and there's this junk in there because of negative events, negative intentions. And just as an aside, real simple way to think about it, how does one accumulate negative karma? It's a combination, it's an algorithm, so to speak, a mathematical equation between intention and results. For example, it's really easy to think about intention. If you intend to do harm to someone or manipulate someone, or intend to do harm to, it could be, we could expand it out to the animal kingdom, or we could expand it out to polluting the earth, right? That will inevitably build up a certain amount of negative karma. If you don't intend to hurt anyone, but yet it still produces a negative result, for example, drunk driving. There's people that drive drunk and then they end up involuntarily killing someone. That's what in the United States it's called manslaughter, right? That would build up an incredible amount of negative karma. Even if the intention wasn't there, the recklessness and the lack of personal responsibility would still build up negative karma. So negative karma accumulation is this interplay between intending to harm someone, or harm life, or even harming oneself. I know it's kind of this, like, it feels like you're getting punished, but it's just not how it works. It's just kind of the laws of karma. Suicide, for example, it does build up, in my understanding, builds up negative karma, because you're hurting oneself, which is just like hurting another person. Because we're all God. That's one level of understanding. We're all in this together as one consciousness, just separated into many different parts, right? So if you harm yourself or you harm any other consciousness, that is harming God, so to speak. It's harming, or the intention is to harm God, even though, it's not really possible. Matter never dies. It's just recreated. It's just, transitions into a new form. That's what death and rebirth is. But that's a good way to look at negative karma accumulation. Positive karma accumulation is kind of the other side of it. Positive intention. Positive intentions to help others, to help the world, to help yourself, to become more of an evolved person yourself. Because, again, looking at it almost mathematically, the higher percentage of human beings on Earth that are evolved spiritually, it would mean a lower percentage of less evolved beings, and it would mean a lower percentage of less evolved issues that are out there. Things like disease, war, crime, these are all manifestations of kind of the lower end of the energy spectrum, so to speak. These are service to self, negatively oriented consciousness energies. And the more people that on Earth that are evolved into the higher frequencies, which are love and unity, that's really what the Age of Aquarius is all about, that we're stepping into. That's what Ascension is all about. The higher percentage of beings on this planet that are there, then the disease and the war and the crime, it can't really exist energetically anymore. And there's all these factors. There's a pyramid of control on this planet that does whatever it possibly can in very nefarious and subversive ways, invisible ways, to stop that ascension as best they can, to put a cap on it, to delay it, because they know that as well. They know that when all the people wake up, or when most of the people wake up, they're done. They can't control it anymore because there's too much light, there's too much energy, and that's what's going to happen over the next couple decades, I do very much believe. But anyways, positive karma is positive intentions and also positive results whenever you help someone else in whatever way. You could help them emotionally. You could help them financially. You could help them just by sending positive thoughts and sending positive intentions to them, and they receive that because we're all connected through the field. And anything positive you do for yourself, anything that improves your own health or evolution, because again, you are part of the field as we all are. You are God as we all are. So that's a really easy way to look at negative karma versus positive karma, and the Hindus know that. In India, it's kind of mainstream to talk about karmas. They usually talk about it in plural. What did you do this week that created positive karmas? What did you do this week that created negative karmas? And there is a truth to that, but it's not, karma is never punishment. In the West, the idea of karma has ended up being this idea of reward and punishment, and that's not how it works. In some lives, all of us listening to this call, I almost guaranteed, have been a bad person. I know I've been a bad person in other lifetimes, and all of us in this lifetime have made mistakes, or at a certain point hurt someone or hurt something. And for most of us, it was a fleeting experience, or it was a part of our lives. And we moved past it because we started becoming more evolved. But all of us have experienced that. And in certain lifetimes, our soul says, I'm going to be a really bad guy. I'm going to be, leading troops into war. Or I'm going to be, just hurting people. I'm going to be a criminal. And we've all had that experience because it's part of that pie. It's part of that pie of the wholeness of the human experience. It's part of a possibility of a Shakespearean play. So our soul wants to, it's part of the journey, it's part of the template of Earth. Coming into Earth as a soul, part of the template is you will experience all sides of this experience. It's both something souls desire to do, and it's also necessary because of, if you just take the ideas of the life plans and the soul contracts out of the equation for a minute and just look at history, because of the level of consciousness of the beings on this planet and the legacy. When you come into the planet, when you're born, you don't have a choice of who the politicians are, of what the economic system is, of what the geopolitical situation is, of what the level of destruction and toxicity of the planet is from pollution. You don't have a choice. You're coming into a preformed creation that you as an individual soul had nothing to do with, unless you had been a major player in other lifetimes that led up to it. And that is a possibility for some people, both positive and negative. But in general, you really didn't have much to do with it. But yet it's already set into motion. So because of that, a good example of this is a soul that chooses to be born into a very low income area where there's a lot more crime, or a country that has been, if you really look into the dark history of our planet from a geopolitical stage, for example, African nations that have been bankrupted by the World Bank and the IMF to no fault of their own except really just long-term, generational, century-to-century institutional racism of the Europeans kind of plundering the African continent. And it still goes on, just in more subversive ways now. And it has been since the end of World War II, especially. You grow up in Uganda, or you grow up in Sudan, you're going to be born into an environment to no fault of your own, where there's going to be crime everywhere. People are starving, and this energy of service to self is predicated off of the necessity for sustenance, the necessity for basic root chakra sustenance, your food, your water, and your shelter. And because of that, there might be this more of a higher probability that you'll enter into a life of crime, for example, or you'll accumulate karma in certain ways. So on one level, the soul is intending to have that experience. On another level, you're stepping into a template, and part of being a part of this earth experience is playing all sorts of different roles, as I said. And really that, in a way, it's contributing to the wholeness of just the experience of Earth as a planetary body itself, or herself. Like I said, the experience of seeing my face as all sorts of different beings. In the past life, doing a past life regression, having one done on me a decade ago was one of the most amazing experiences and most crucial experiences of my entire journey. Was going in, I actually went into an office to do it. It was back before, you could find this stuff really on the internet too easily. And just being led into these lives where I saw myself experiencing really horrible deaths. But it gave me an understanding of why I had certain fears in this lifetime. It gave me an understanding of why I had such a desire to dig and to understand the complexities and the darkness of the world, what's hidden behind the scenes. It helped me to understand so many things about myself. But it's because, so essentially, as a soul, you're going to end up experiencing all of it. And when you do, just because your soul chooses to be born, like the example of being born into an area, maybe a low-income area in the West, or maybe a nation in Africa or Asia where there's a lot of poverty and there's going to be a lot more crime because of that. Just because your soul chose that experience, it doesn't make you immune from accumulating negative karma. The same laws apply. The same laws of karma apply. So if you incarnate into a rough area and you end up really acting out of service to self, or hurting others, or taking from others, or committing crimes that are going to accumulate karma, you're still accumulating karma. And then as a soul, how do you balance out that karma? Well, one of the easiest ways to balance out that karma, this is where the whole idea of like karmic retribution comes from, the whole idea of Shiva, the whole idea of you reap what you sow, is one of the easiest ways is to experience that happening to you in another lifetime. And we do that a lot as souls. And the idea, it's not out of punishment, ever. The idea is that if we can experience it from the other side, so if we were the perpetrator in one lifetime and then we experience the same experience yet on the other side as the victim, the hope from a soul level, the idea is that will help us to understand, to empathetically have a level of understanding of what that experience is like, of what we did. And I'm sure all of us, if we're really self-aware and we're really honest with ourselves, can actually label parts of, can look into our lives up until now in this current body and look at a situation where something happened to us and we realize, wow, I did that to someone else when I was really unaware, when I was a teenager or when I was in my 20s or whatever. And wow, you know, some people in school, in middle school, were bullied, like myself. I was bullied, you know. But then how did we overcompensate? You know, as a kid, there were other kids that were like lower down on the social hierarchy of school, which is just so stupid. But that I would pick on, you know, and it was because I guess my soul was trying to get me to see, oh, that's what that's like, you know. And I realized it later on, of course, as I started to evolve. But I'm sure all of us can just in our own lives label and see times where we got a taste of our own medicine. And for much bigger things, it tends to not always happen within the same lifetime. Very often it will happen in a subsequent lifetime. Because the reason being is because the setup can be more powerful. It can be more impactful to one's life plan if the proper soul contract is created. So a lot of times when there's this karmic trade-offs or this karmic balancing, you know, I did this to you, now you're going to do this to me. You know, in lifetime A, we set that up, and you know, and then in lifetime B, we now have a chance to really plan out as souls the perfect circumstances for that to take place. And the idea is, it's not punishment. The idea is that, hopefully I get a taste on some deep level of what this is like, and now I've balanced that out, and now it helps me to know what that's like, so now I can help others who are going through the similar experience. So the way karma works between souls especially is like this. It's like a boomerang. The karma is created, negative karma. The negative karma is created somewhere in some lifetime, and that's throwing out the boomerang. That is sometimes pre-planned between souls, and sometimes it's not. It's sometimes you just get into the body, you get into this life, and you say, you know what? I'm going to go steal all this gold or shekels from my my brother, because I'm going to take what's mine. Okay, and that's just your own free will. And so you do that, and that builds that negative karma. And then, okay, as a soul in between lives, you have this discussion with your brother's soul from that lifetime and your guides and angels, and you say, how can we best balance this out? All right, let's plan a circumstance where, you know, you're going to be my best friend in this next lifetime, and I'm going to have a lot of wealth, and you're going to steal from me. And then once we balance that out, hopefully you will learn now, then, you know, because of that, you know, a lot of times we're taking a fall on the sword, so to speak, when it comes to karma. Because then in another lifetime, the person that stole is still going to have to then rebalance that somehow. But they might choose to do it in a different way. They might not want to do it by having the same experience happen. They might want to be, for example, a victim again of being stolen from, but this time they're in such a more conscious place that it doesn't hurt their journey, and then they may end up becoming very good, for example, at giving to others, at helping the poor. So the boomerang gets thrown out, that's the negative karma. It generally will come back, and that's generally something that's negotiated between souls. And then from there, it's about alchemy. So it's about how can we alchemize these karmic experiences that we both now experience because we traded them back and forth. How can we alchemize them in order to be of service to the greater whole, which will build up good karma for ourselves, which will help us along the ascension ladder through the third density. So there's always the ending is always positive. It's always about alchemy. And when it comes to relationships, when it comes to soul contracts between souls, especially, it's really easy to look at this with familial and romantic relationships. Whether it seems like it or not, and a lot of times, maybe your sister and you had a falling out 30 years ago and she hasn't spoken to you in 30 years. Or maybe you decided to be a different religion than your parents and they completely pushed you out of the family. Or maybe you were betrayed or abused in the worst possible way by your ex-husband. And this is all very, these are common experiences, and it's hard to think and think about the possibility that the end trajectory of these karmic relationships is actually towards resolution and contribution to the whole. But this is true. Imagine a pyramid in your mind, and I'm just kind of downloading this right now as a visual. The base level of the pyramid, which is going to be the lowest frequency, everyone's fighting. Everyone's hurting each other and fighting. It's like the Five of Wands in the tarot. And that's the accumulation of karma, and then the karmic backlash, so to speak. That's thrown out the boomerang of karma, having it come back over and over again. But then the next level of that pyramid is all of the individual souls that were fighting. Now they're working together. It's like the Three of Cups in the tarot. Now they're working together to better each other and to better the whole, to better society, the human race. And then the next level of that pyramid, which is where we're kind of inching towards in this time period that we find ourselves now, is actually more literally being one whole group. And that's the highest energy of Aquarius. That's what the age of Aquarius is all about. So now we're all working together. Now imagine us as these almost like cells bunched together, where all these cells bunched together into like a beehive, a honeycomb formation, because we now all have actually become one. And from an energetic scientific level, that would be the fourth density, and then the fifth density and the sixth density is even more of that conglomeration of all these individual souls into one body working together as one. So it all makes sense if you really step back and think about it. Why we do all this? It's because of the frequency we're at. When we're in the lower octaves of the third density, or the third dimension, what we're going to do is just keep accumulating karma back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. As we start to rise up through the octaves, through the middle and upper levels of the third density, and towards that fourth density, now, or the fifth dimension, whatever you want to call it, now we're actually focused on alchemy and working together. But that alchemy, all the Five of Wands as a metaphor, all of the karmic experiences of throwing this karma back and forth ends up being crucial, because without it, we would not have had the contrast between literally negative karma creation back and forth versus working as one body. Because that's ascension in a nutshell. Ascension in a nutshell is moving from being seemingly separate to being seemingly merged with everyone. And it's hard to see right now because we're all so different. We all look different on this planet. We all have different economic situations, drastically different. We have different there's thousands of different languages on this planet. There's the cultural differences are extreme, between different geographical areas on this planet. It's hard to believe, but that is ascension. The ascension is all the individuals merging into one. So, a lot of us listening to this call have really, for the most part, moved past that negative karma. we've balanced for a lot of awakening beings, this is the Ascension Lifetime. During the Ascension Lifetime, your soul says, all right, we got to catch up. We want to come into this time period and we want to really catch up with how quickly the planet itself is ascending. So what we're going to do is very rapidly, quickly rebalance out soul contracts, alchemize what needs to be alchemized. So that's why a lot of awakening beings had really difficult childhoods. That's why a lot of awakening beings have had a lot of health problems. That's why a lot of awakening beings have been abused or been in addiction. It's because your soul, if you're in your Ascension Lifetime, and you probably are if you're listening to this call, your soul wanted to just put it all out on the table for you to work through really, really quickly. That's why a lot of awakening beings have really intense relationships and then they end. That's why a lot of awakening beings have really intense, dark family issues that they have to work through. It's because you're meant to work through it very quickly in this lifetime so you can get to that place where you're no longer just managing karma. Because when you're managing karma all the time, it's hard to step into those upper levels of service work and opening up the higher chakras above the head and opening up the possibilities for really good health and immortality and some of the amazing things that, for example, the Indian Babas have experienced in the age of Pisces. It's hard to do that when you're just managing karma. And, the Indian Babas, the real ones, not the ones that were, sexually abusing students behind the scenes, and many of them were, but the real ones, and there are real ones, and there were real ones, they had moved past that karmic management, that karmic, just the boomerang is going back and forth, and into just being able to step fully into that ascending body, and then all the, they learn how to levitate, and they learn how to be completely telepathic or immortal, And in India, there's people that have lived for hundreds and hundreds of years. Same in Nepal. There's people who have lived for hundreds or thousands of years. It's just not, really discussed much in the West because it's not something Westerners would ever believe is possible, but it is. So as an ascending being, a lot of us are at that point. We're at kind of starting to move over, metaphorically, the hump. Like we've kind of gotten to the top of the hill of just working through the muddiness of karma and karmic contracts, and we're starting to get above the hill where we can just step more completely into service work. And that'll be a topic for another future call here, or, I have all sorts of talks on that on my website about stepping into service work. And your North Node, by the way, we won't go into all the North and South nodes. We don't have time today, but your North Node is in your natal chart in Western astrology is a great place to look for what your service work is meant to be. It's like it's kind of the general, it's not the specific work. You should look at your midheaven, your 10th house for that. But it's kind of the overall frequency of how your service work is supposed to play out. And so for me, it's Aries. So it's about being a leader. It's about being my life path number is 1. Numerology also is like astrology, where it's a desired template that your soul will try to, as best it can, create the numerology and astrology desires in order to have the experience it would like in that particular incarnation. And so I'm a life path 1. I'm a Leo rising. I'm a North Node Aries. So it's all about leadership. It's all about leading a pack. It's all about being fiercely independent. So that's just one little tip with astrology. So the health part is something that's so fascinating to me because I'm someone that has struggled with health issues my entire life, and I see my health issues have been around my head, and I had significant trauma in my head in this lifetime and also in past lives. Several incarnations that I saw in the past life regression I did 10 years ago was, my head. That's how my life ended, So if you look at what part of your body has the most issues, for me, it's always been my head. For some people, it could be their heart. For some people, it could be one of their legs. For some people, it could be their liver. Look at what part of your body has the most health issues, and you will know that you have been probably killed in other lifetimes in that part of your body. Birthmarks, if you have any really large birthmarks, that's an idea of where you may have had a tumor or may have been stabbed or shot in another lifetime. If you have skin issues, it may have been where you were burned in another lifetime. If you have like boils or lumps, it can be where there was a tumor. There's a lot of possibilities. Those are just some examples, but the reason this happens is from like a soul perspective is because when you experience a major health event, or so cancer or getting shot in the head or whatever, like it's a major energetic event, and it leaves an imprint, kind of a hole, so to speak, on one way to look at it, but it leaves a karmic imprint in that area of your energy field. And because of that, in that, so think about, like for my client that was stabbed in the chest, that's going to leave an imprint in that part of her photonic field, her toroidal field, her energy field, an imbalance right there in the heart region. Or we could say, or in the heart region of the auric field. And because of that, it's going to manifest something in another lifetime, because the idea is that as the ego personality, you need to work through that energetic imbalance, even though it was to no fault of your own. You still have to work through it. It's like in this lifetime, if if you had cancer in a certain organ, and you healed the cancer through chemotherapy or whatever, just as one example, and then it comes back, and it could be because of certain aspects of chemotherapy, but also from this soul karmic perspective, it's like the organ itself, that there's still an energetic imbalance there, and in that organ, and also in the chakra that's right there. And if that energetic imbalance isn't fully healed, then it's going to end up remanifesting. So it's the same thing from lifetime to lifetime. When you have major health events, or you die in a certain way in a previous lifetime, it's going to usually in a lesser way, like why do, I've done a lot of work on, a lot of research on cancer. It's one of my, it's one of the things that really interests me the most. I found that cancer, I believe, is largely genetic, as most doctors believe. And then there's the idea of epigenetics, the environmental factors, our thoughts, our emotions, life circumstances that will then turn on or turn off certain genes. Why does a 2-year-old get leukemia or a 5-year-old get leukemia? Why does a 5-year-old pass away from leukemia? There's probably that soul had chosen to, out of service, have that experience, give that experience to their parents. This is usually the case, of grief and of losing their child, and then usually alchemizing it by maybe spending, after they lose their child, helping other people's children, or helping, contributing to try to mitigate the disease or whatever. And that positive intention is very powerful in building positive karma. But what's happening also is that soul is using that opportunity to be able to really strongly re-experience a past life death, and be able to use it now as an opportunity for learning for themselves as a soul, and for their parents and whoever else, siblings or whatever that's around them. And then what will probably happen, that 5-year-old that passed away through leukemia, they'll come back, and they might get cancer again. And it sounds cruel, but this is just how it works. It's got to dissipate. Major health issues have to dissipate through lifetimes out of your energy field, unless you're really adept at quickly overcoming your karmic issues, and we'll briefly talk about that in just 1 second. But unless you're really able to quickly overcome your issues, it'll have to dissipate through lifetime. So that 5-year-old then will come back probably, and maybe when they're 50, end up with bone cancer or end up with blood cancer, or whatever again. But this time they'll make it through. And this time they'll learn everything they need to from it, and they'll live a long, happy life, and maybe even enter their ascension, into their ascension time. So it has to dissipate through life. So it's just something interesting to look at, the parts of your body that are most vulnerable or have the most issues. That's where you've had the same issues in other lifetimes. Okay, quickly. Can we move through our karmic issues? The title of this, I don't want to not talk about this because it's the title of the show. Understanding, okay, we've understood our past life karmic obstacles, overcoming your past life karmic obstacles. Inevitably, in this lifetime, you're going to have obstacles pop up. The obstacles will often, because astrology is so powerful, will often pop up when you have difficult transits in your chart. You might have a Pluto squaring something, or Saturn squaring something natal, or Saturn or Pluto coming across your 8th house or something like that. And you'll have these obstacles, these things that are of no fault of your own, just pop up that you have to move through. The intention is from your soul, it's in your life plan, the intention is for you to learn what you need to learn and alchemize it into something positive. You're always meant to take the lemons and make them into lemonade. That's a rule, okay? Everything is always put in your life plan for your benefit. Everything is always working out in your favor for your benefit, whether it seems like it or not. So the idea is you always alchemize what is presented to you. Okay, so one person is presented with grief because they lose someone, and it leads them into addiction and codependency with a toxic partner and hurting themselves. Another person takes it and becomes comfortable with death, becomes comfortable with loss, the very Scorpio energies, becomes comfortable with the transient and nature of all things. Matter is never destroyed; it always just transforms. And they use it as a launching point to say, life is short. I'm not going to wait anymore. Now I'm gonna go into my service work. I'm going to go into what I've always felt deep inside that I was supposed to do on this planet. That's a great example of how one person could let an event trigger their bad subconscious patterns, so to speak, of maybe escapism or seeking out codependent relationships or hurting themselves or self-sabotaging because of an external event. And the external event could be cancer, it could be a health event, it could be a car accident, it could be anything. Where another person will be able to overcome, and granted, how your parents were, I read something, a Harvard study that found that people's incomes were largely predicated on their genetics. And it's kind of, it can feel self-defeating to read about the power of genetics, but it's very true. If you have more, that's the idea of ancestral karma. If you have more negative karmic patterns, negative subconscious patterns in your parents and their parents, etc., let's take poverty, for example. It's going to take much more conscious willpower and assimilation of the ascension energies that are being transmitted to you by your soul, by the sun, that if you're able to assimilate them, if you're able to find when your angels leave little nuggets of wisdom in books or videos, whatever in your experience, and you're able to overcome those patterns and be different than your parents, then you're accelerating the journey, and you're moving out of that karmic, throwing the karmic baseball back and forth or the boomerang back and forth, and just moving more into your service mission as a soul on this earth. So it's about your conscious awareness. How are you able to really be the conscious driver of your experience. It's about free will. It's about willpower, as opposed to letting the subconscious patterns, the negative ones, that come from your parents, that come from your genetics, that come from your ancestral lineage, to just operate you by default. A great place to look at, if you're interested in this sort of work, and you should be, because this is like the secret to life, is Dr. Joe Dispenza. His books, his talks, this is all what it is. It's about overcoming yourself, overcoming your patterning. And that's how we move past the karmic obstacles much more quickly, and even potentially sidestep different karmic obstacles, because we end up making higher. Remember I talked about the life plan being like an algorithm where if you choose this, then these are the options. If you choose that, then these are the options. Well, if you're operating from a higher frequency, where you're operating from more of a conscious willpower rather than your set programming that comes from your parents and from your ancestral lineage and your genetics, then you are going to be making higher vibrational choices that will put you onto higher vibrational paths in your life, where the algorithm is now working out where more in your favor, so to speak, where you're going to have much better emotional experiences, and you're going to much more easily able to manifest what you want in this life. Anytime you're not manifesting what you want in this life, it's because on some level it's a threat to some part of you. And that part of you that feels threatened by it is a program that's operating in you that probably your mom or dad had, one of them or both of them, and their parents had, and so on. So it's genetic. So it's about overcoming the negative aspects of our genetics. It's about maximizing the conscious willpower. That's how you accelerate. And, you know, in Hinduism, they have mantras for overcoming karma. You can do magic for overcoming karma. You can, there's all sorts of ways, and these tools can help. These tools can help to energetically clear. For example, working, I love, as an astrologer, I love working with the planets in magical ways. My magical practice, and I am a witch, you know, a good witch, but I love working with the planets themselves. You know, before I got on this call, Mercury is so amplified today. Mercury is stationing. I said, oh, dear Mercury, you know, please help me to speak clearly during this call, you know. So working with the planets, working with magic mantras, it can help to accelerate, but it's not going to completely, you know, absolve you of having to live out the karma. It's still going to be up to you how quickly or how not so quickly, you know, in the context of this Ascension Lifetime, you move through that karma. So that's my not a TED Talk, my Moncef talk.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much, Matthew. Yeah, for all the information you shared with us, very inspiring. Yeah, so again, thank you everyone, and I'm sending you so much love, and I will see you on the next call. Bye-bye everyone.